Dear friends, I'm certainly happy to be standing here. This is probably the first time I'm addressing an audience of this kind. Normally, I address university students or professors only. And some people said my writing was ahead of my time. This is probably the reason why I dreaded to face people of my generation, because they would easily misunderstand my writings. Before I begin, I must tell you one thing. The past 4 weeks have been terrible for me, most unbearably unhappy for me. I was at the bedside of my brother for 1 month, and then he died. I was at the bedside of my husband, who became seriously ill, and I was nursing him, and I've nursed him back to health. He is shaky, he cannot walk, but he is able to remember things. He had a stroke. So after all this, I have come to Delhi as a very tired woman, and today there were about a dozen interviews in my room. People came with photographs, and you know how tiring it is. So if at all I displease you or do not come to the expectations of all of you, you must try to forgive me, knowing the reason. I'm used to reading poetry. It comes naturally to me. So if you would allow me, I will read 1 or 2 poems and later speak a little and answer all your questions. Well, if you were to ask me why I began to write with freedom, I must go back to my childhood. I lived in a joint family during my summer vacations, which went on sometimes for a whole year. There was the war raging in Germany. Not Germany, I don't know where the war was, in fact. But at that time, I lived with my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and her sister, and my granduncle in a large house, old-fashioned, tiled house, called the Nalapat house. I became acquainted with the stories of those old women. I had this great-grandmother's sister who had suffered a great deal. She had to obey her uncle's commands. Uncle commanded her to divorce her husband, to send him away. I don't know the reason. She did not tell me the reason either. But she was in love with the man. He was the father of her son. And she waited. She used to go every afternoon and stand at the fence. It was a long vigil, just to catch a glimpse of the man when he passed that way. And then a new marriage was thrust upon her, a new husband she did not want. So these were the sufferings, these were the kind of stories all the women in my background had to tell me. So I thought, I will not be able to continue living. I will not be able to grow into a woman like them, with silence which did not protect them at all. And they carried that silence with them. When they were dead, well, nobody even ever talked about their love affairs. I'm talking about a marriage, which is also a love affair. If you're in love with a man and you marry him, that becomes a beautiful love affair. Some of us have been lucky to have that kind of a love affair, a respectable. Till recent times, women lacked the social and intellectual authority to write seriously. I don't have to tell you, all of you know that. There are certain prescribed norms for a woman's writing. When I was growing up, there was no tradition for us to fall back on, no model to emulate. Well, then the question is, why didn't you emulate your mother? Mother was a writer. Mother is still a writer. Even last month she wrote a few poems. But mother never wrote freely, frankly. I remember after my husband's death, she wrote a few lines secretly and showed them to me. She talked about the softness, the smoothness of my father's skin, of her man's skin, of his face. And I thought it was most touching. Because why did she have to leave out that? She wouldn't send those lines to the weekly to be printed along with the other part of the article. She said, it isn't possible for me to write that way. But she wrote, and it was very moving. That's how a woman remembers her man. And if you had removed that, 25% of the quality of that article would have been removed. I wanted to see everything in a complete fashion. And then there was the lack of an audience. Now, when I went to Kerala, as a writer who wrote in English, I realized I became lonely. I didn't belong there. There was no audience for my English poetry. And then I realized for the first time that without an audience, I will not be able to function at all as a writer. Although in many interviews, earlier interviews, I used to say, well, I write for myself. Writing erupts like prickly heat. No. I need an audience all around me, applauding me, and maybe loving me. Then I suppose the prescribed themes for any woman's writing were God and domestic bliss. Nothing else. The body, the physicality was to be ignored. Of course, in other places, not in India, you had Afro Ben, you had Dorothy Wordsworth, all these people. Here we had Avvayar and Mirabai, but they wrote of God. They sang of God. That was allowed. But what happens to you? What happens to a woman when a man becomes her God, her living God? Has she no right to write about that God? Well, now I think before I go on and on, using the notes I wrote today, I should read a poem because then I welcome questions and I'll be very happy to answer questions. Very simple poem, one of the earlier ones. This is called Blood. I come from a feudal background. You know what a feudal society is? It's sort of, it concentrates on war. It used to, on war. And males had to be kept ready for war, ready for the killing, really, fattened, pampered. And the woman, of course, stayed behind, produced children or looked after the males, fed them. When we were children, my brother and I, and always playing on the sands, drawing birds and animals, our great-grandmother said one day, "You see this house of ours, now 300 years old. It's falling to little bits before our very eyes. The walls are cracked and torn and moistened by the rains. The tiles have fallen here and there, and windows whine and groan, and every night the rats come out of holes and scamper past our doors. The snake shrine is dark with weeds, and all the snake gods in the shrine have lichen on their hoods. Oh, it hurts me," she cried, wiping a reddened eye. "For I love this house, it hurts me much to watch it die. When I grow old," I said, "and very, very rich, I shall rebuild the fallen walls and make new this ancient house." My great-grandmother touched my cheeks and smiled. She was really simple, fed on God for years. All her feasts were monotonous, for the only dish was always God and the rest mere condiments. She told us how she rode her elephant when she was 10 or 11, every Monday without fail, to the Shiva shrine and back to home again, and told us of the jewel box and the brocade from the north, and the perfumes and the oils, and the sandal for her breast, and her marriage to a prince who loved her deeply for a lovely short year, and died of fever in her arms. She told us that we had the oldest blood, my brother, and she, and I. The oldest blood in the world, a blood thin and clear and fine, while in the veins of the always poor and in the veins of the new rich men flowed a blood thick as gruel and muddy as a ditch. Finally, she lay dying in her 86th year, a woman wearied by compromise, her legs quilted with arthritis and with only a hard cough for comfort. I looked deep into her eyes, her poor bleary eyes, and prayed that she would not grieve so much about the house. I had learned by then most lessons of defeat, had found out that to grow rich was a difficult feat. The house was crouching on his elbows then. It looked at night in the pallid moon, so grotesque and alive. When they burnt my great-grandmother over logs of the mango tree, I looked once at the house and then again and again, for I thought I saw the windows close, like the closing of the eyes. I thought I heard the pillars groan and the dark rooms heave a sigh. I set forth for other towns, left the house with the shrine and the sands and the flowering shrubs and the wide rabbit mouth of the Arabian Sea. I know the rats are running now across the darkened halls. They do not fear the dead. I know the white ants have reached my home and have raised on walls strange totems of burial. At night, in stillness, from every town I live in, I hear the rattle of its death, the noise of rafters creaking, and the windows whine. I have let you down, old house, I seek forgiveness. O mother's mother's mother, I have plucked your soul like a pip from a fruit, and have flung it into your pyre. Call me callous, call me selfish, but do not blame my blood, so thin, so clear, so fine, the oldest blood in the world, that remembers as it flows all the gems and all the gold, and all the perfumes and the oils, and the stately elephant ride. Another. Ultimately, I have come face to face with the sea. In the beginning, the sea was only the wind's ceaseless whisper in a shell. But lying beside my grandmother, quite often I thought that I could hear at night the surf breaking on the shore. The sea was only 2 miles away. That is long ago, before the skin, intent on survival, learnt lessons of self-betrayal. Before the red house that had stood for innocence crumbled, and the old woman died, lying for 3 months, paralyzed, while the thieving ants climbed her hands and ate the cuticle. Perhaps my innocence is not all that lost, if the stones still endure, and pieces of mortar lie scattered in the field. It may be that in my heart I have replaced love with guilt, and discovered that both love and hate are involvements. But this only signifies growth, and growth is natural. The tragedy of life is not death, but growth. The child growing into adult and growing out of needs, discovering that the old have black-rimmed nails and scalps that emanate a sweet, moldy smell. Scalps from which emanate a sweet, moldy smell. In the years that followed, I was busy growing. I had then no time at all for the sea. But there was off and on a seascape in my dreams, and the water sloshing up and sliding down. When I got married, my husband said, "You may have freedom as much as you want." My soul balked at this diet of ash. Freedom became my dancing shoe. How well I danced and danced without rest, until the shoes turned grimy on my feet, and I began to have doubts. I asked my husband, "Am I hetero? Am I lesbian? Or am I just plain frigid?" He only laughed. For such questions, probably there are no answers, or else the answers must emerge from within. I have lost my best friend to a middle-aged queer. The lesbians hiss their love at me. Love I no longer need. With tenderness I am most content. I have learned that friendship cannot endure, that blood ties do not satisfy. And so with every interesting man I meet, Be it a curious editor or a poet with a skin yellowed like antique paper, a skin older than Jesus Christ, I must most deliberately whip up a froth of desire, a passion to suit the occasion. I must let my mind striptease, I must extrude autobiography. The only secrets I always withhold are that I'm so alone and that I miss my grandmother. Reader, you may say, now here is a girl with vast sexual hungers, a bitch after my own heart. But I'm not yours for the asking. Grovel at my feet, remove your monkey suits and dance, sing irato, irato, irato. Yet I shall be indifferent, not because of morality, but because I do not feel the need. But why worry? What I am able to give is only what your wife is qualified to give. We are all alike, we women, in our wrappings of hairless skin. All skeletons are alike, only the souls vary that hide somewhere between the flesh and the bone. Skin a human being and he will still breathe. Starve a person, break his flesh until he is reduced to skin and bones, yet he will live with attention. But stripped of skin and flesh, the skeleton is dead and most indifferent to the soul. When I was home on vacation some 30 years ago, my grandmother asked me to spend one night in the old family home. We shall talk, she said. Darling, we shall talk all night. And in the evening, she kept a lighted lantern on the windowsill and sat up waiting for me. The house was 300 years old. Its rafters shook in the wind. Those who thought my life precious cried, do not go there. We shall have no peace with you sleeping under the tottering roof. My grandmother's lamp burnt all night on the windowsill. I know it is no use regretting now or feeling ashamed. I also know that by confessing, by peeling off my layers, I reach closer to the soul and to the bones, supreme indifference. Only those who like to listen, listen. What I narrate are the ordinary events of an ordinary life. My first schoolhouse is now a brothel, and the ladies sun themselves on the lawn in the afternoons with their graying hair, newly washed, left undyed. Who can say, looking at them, that they are toys fit for the roaring nights? There must be something symbolic here, but I do not remember what. I have gathered a few morals too, picking them like wild flowers on my way. Husbands and wives, here is my advice to you. Obey each other's crazy commands. Ignore the sane. Turn your home into a merry doghouse. Marriage is meant to be all this, anyway. Arranged in most humorous heaven. I have reached the age in which one forgives all. I am ready to forgive friends their loving. Forgive those who ruin friendships and those who forgave and stayed on to love. But I shall give a lot to get one of my foes today. For a quiet picnic somewhere, not having met for ages, we shall have much to say. But seriously, I must wake up, come alive. I tell myself and all of you who scan the mirror for the white gleam in the hair, fall in love. Fall in love with an unsuitable person. Fling yourself on him like a moth on a flame. Let there be despair in every move. Excavate deep pain. To be frank, I have failed. I feel my age and my uselessness. All I want now is to take a long walk into the sea and lie there resting, completely uninvolved. But rest is only a childish whim, a minor hunger. Greater hungers lurk at the basement of the sea. Ultimately, I will feed only the hunger to feed other hungers. That basic one, to crumble, to dissolve, and to retain in other things the potent fragments of oneself. The ultimate discovery will be that we are immortal, the only things mortal being systems and arrangements, even our pains continuing in the devourers who constitute the world. Even oft-repeated moves of every scattered cell will give no power to escape from cages of involvement. I must linger on, trapped in immortality, my only freedom being the freedom to discompose. Thank you. Now, I will expect a few questions. That will be resting time for me. I will answer. Then maybe I will read more or talk. I expect a few questions. That will make it lively. I suppose I gave all my vitality to the interviewers. There were so many women, men, photographers. Yes?
Very difficult to ask a question from a poet because what you describe is your personal experience. I just want to ask you a very simple question. When you started beginning writing this frankly, did you have that fear of the society? You mentioned little bit, but did something deter you from writing this?
I was fully conscious of my role in society, that I have come here to change it a little bit, if possible. So I slipped into that role easily. I had to make up for, the sins committed against women, the silence inflicted on them. So I didn't want to suffer. I didn't want to become a weepy, suffering woman.
Have you succeeded in any way to an extent in this agenda? Personally, not in the whole society.
Personally, I'm a great success. I have made my marriage survive. It's a happy marriage. I look after him, and, well, my relationship with my children is not too bad either. So I think I am a great success in domestic life. And society began to accept me when I became a social worker.
Do you think you became a success because of your writing? With your family?
No, not because of my writing. It is probably because of my kindness, my compassion. It helped.
Very kindly to you?
They're not very kind to me, but, well, I thought, well, I shall retain it.
Did you get drawn to English for the reason that you must have felt that expression, French expression, would be probably possible in that language, the kind that you were striving for, rather than in Malayalam? I'm just asking you.
Actually, when I went to school for the first time, the British were ruling the country, and it was absolutely necessary for me to learn English. I went to a European school called St. Cecilia's in Calcutta. So I had to learn English. And the frankness, the word which I have been hearing from every audience, is not such frankness when you come to think of it. They think sex. They just mean sex when they say you have been frank. See? I don't mean that at all. I am talking about cruelty. When I talk about cruelty, that's frankness. See? I'm afraid I haven't read much. They picked me out of school and got me married. So I didn't have any model to emulate. I didn't have anyone to guide me. And this helped a great deal. I realized later that ignorance can be used as a very positive thing, like a leap board. If you have ambition. Yes? No. Yes. It's about as real as every other book you find on the bookshop, the bookshelves. That's all. I'm a professional writer. There are versions and versions. The German version is different, the English version, the Bengali version. Yes.
I want to know, is it born talent or acquired talent?
What's that? I suppose you would call it this way, imitation of a mother, because little girls imitate the mothers. If the mothers work in the kitchen and roll out chapatis, they will begin to do that. My mother only wrote. She never did any housework. So I emulated her. She's a writer.
Do you advocate that women do not make chapatis instead of
Oh no, I love to cook myself. I wouldn't advocate. There's a lot of pleasure in that.
In your talk you mentioned
Yeah.
that in childhood you were away in some country. And
Not some country, right here in India, but ruled by the British. You were not born. Don't talk about. So,
In earlier generation,
yeah.
women poets,
Huh.
I think Sarojini Devi is a good example of even much later.
No, no, I'm not talking about Sarojini Naidu was there, but certainly I didn't want to be like Sarojini Naidu. She was a political person. No, I would never try to write the way she does because that's another territory altogether. Lot of beauty and I haven't seen so much of beauty, so I can't write about beauty. I could not write. I tried my hand, I brought out a book, but it is not a success. It's very difficult.
Can you elaborate on this point that you have not seen beauty? How is it possible that you are a poet and you have not seen beauty?
I see beauty of a horrible kind. You see, in people.
Please elaborate.
Yeah.
Can you say,
Yes,
can you say what kind of social work you do now?
I can.
And why you are not in politics?
I'll tell you.
Let her answer my question.
Which one?
Tell us, how are you a poet if you have not seen beauty? You cannot be a poet if you have not seen beauty in your life. Please explain please explain what you mean by saying that you have not seen beauty.
I see a kind of beauty which Sarojini Naidu doesn't see, did not ever see, and I see, and she has seen a kind of beauty which I do not see. We have two visions, separate visions. Another kind. Yes, I know, I understand. I work as the chairman of the Forestry Board Kerala. I'm supposed to be an environmentalist. And of course, we have bureaucratized environment, we have bureaucratized literature, as you can see, Sahitya Akademi and all that. But yet, I've been trying to do a good job, but it's not easy. There are political reasons why I should remove myself from that post. So people attack me, make wild allegations, and yet I go on and on. I plant trees, I make people plant trees. I hold workshops and seminars, and I know how foolish people are to to hold workshops and seminars. Nothing is achieved. A lot of money is wasted. But that's my work. And I did try to enter politics, but I lost. I stood for the parliamentary elections as an independent, and I lost.
So had you succeeded, you would have stayed on in politics.
God forbid.
So you fought the election.
I did, because I wanted to help the very poor women in our state. That was for that, merely for that. And I think now that then I lost, and I feel happy that I lost. I wouldn't have been able to be a useful member of the society if I had come to the parliament. I would have been wasted here. Just 2 minutes of conversation or something. You can only use 2 minutes in a month or something. It's not possible for me.
The poet answer says it is better to have loved and lost than have never loved and lost. So you have tasted politics.
I don't think I'm a poet who ever lost.
As you come from Kerala,
Yes.
what was your opinion or expression about this recent controversy about Tipu Sultan?
I don't think, well, I'm not bigoted. I have never attached any importance to this difference between Hindu, Muslim, or Hindu, these things.
He rose only from Kerala, and nowhere in India it was so much as it was from Trivandrum and other.
You know what they are. They're supposed to be literate, so they have to quarrel. They have to, literate people are like that. They must find reasons to raise controversies.
What is your message for the Indian women?
I have no message. I'm waiting for some message to come to me from the Indian women. What I should do next, they must tell me. I have worked for them. Now what should I do? The next step.
Suppose they ask
Yes.
your advice.
Okay, now I give advice. Who made mistakes all her life? A woman like me. I make mistakes and I learn.
In your writing,
Ah.
in your introduction,
Yes.
you give three different types of very contradictory persona and you project them. On one side, you have a very stentorian voice, which is free, frank, and quite often very furious. On the other side, you fit to the introvert. You go back nostalgic left alone. How do you combine these three complexities in such a harmonious way?
I should tell you one thing. The voice I cultivated over the years, because I do nothing but go around reciting. I'm invited to many places, everywhere, many different universities where my poetry is taught. I go abroad, and I realize that sometimes the microphone fails, so I should cultivate my voice. And I can manage even without a microphone. Now, the other thing about being an introvert, that's not really true, because it's true I used to miss my grandmother and stayed on like an ache for many years because she loved me, and what I missed was love. But I managed to get over it by buying a dog, a little puppy, poodle, and I think it is okay. The pain was much less. I think if you want love, if you want to feel loved, you must invest in a dog. That's it. Well, what to do? I don't seem to meet very loving human beings. Yes. I think they're easier to get on with. They're not inhibited or warped. So you see, they don't sit there with a critical eye. They're ready to accept you. You feel more at ease with people of other countries, really speaking. Because I don't seem to be able to get on with people of my generation. The young ones are okay. The young ones look forward to what I say. And here, of course, they'll behave like a good audience, but go home and criticize. I know that. I expect all that. Yes? That's true. And I accept that. I accept people's cruelty.
I want to ask you a question
Yes.
about bureaucracy, because you regretted the fact that environment has been bureaucratized, and so is the Sahitya Akademi, your literature. I think you could say that what Sahitya Akademi.
I'm just pulling your legs. I'm not that serious.
I can tell you as a bureaucrat member of the Sahitya Akademi, it's absolutely free, like singing, dancing, birds. But isn't bureaucracy, if you understand it properly, inevitable? It's in the God hierarchy. It's probably in your family also. And
Yes, my husband was.
Lay down rules. You must lay down rules for your children or for your husband if you're domineering. So I guess it's inevitable. I don't think it's something so repulsive as you made it out.
If I were domineering as a wife, he would have run away from my home long time ago. I knew certain women's wiles. I knew how to be gentle, pleading, clinging, helpless. All these things, It's not that I advocate all that, but it's fun too. If you take it as a game, whole life, it's fun too. Try to be,
In one word, what attracts you most in life?
Most in life.
Just one word.
Do you feel any commitment?
Rose water. I love to wash my face with rose water. The feeling, yes?
Do you feel any commitment, being a writer, do you feel any commitment towards society?
Yes.
Towards
I
the
do.
people, towards the surroundings?
Yes, I do.
And if that commitment and that ideal is there, do you think you really write for that particular?
I'm writing for that. In recent years, I have started to feel that there is an obligation to society. Society has given me such a lot, and therefore I owe them something. That's why I became a social worker. Yes?
You said that you are not seeing beauty, but at the same time you said that you love to plant trees. Don't you think that beauty you find in trees and in nature?
No, I don't mean that. I was talking about emotional things, not something you can see. Huh? Yes, Yes, my beauty is different, that's all. For instance, I will not probably write about roses and birds and that and this. These things are not relevant to me.
Beauty is not only to be written about, it's a sense of feeling.
Yeah.
So you might feel a sense of beauty just being in nature, being with plants.
Well, I see all these beautiful faces. Yes, some of the ladies are really beautiful. That kind of thing. You know, they are in beautiful clothes. Their faces look radiant. All that. I appreciate flowers. These flowers I don't like. No, but some things I approve of. You know. Pardon? Oh, yes, all right. That will, of course, invite some criticism.
This is too much. Going on for an hour. Come here and sit down, put the lights in your eyes and see how it's out. Ridiculous.
Your opinion about Indo-English poetry.
Come this side and put it up to the other side and see how they feel. I don't care who's asked them, I'm telling you what we are feeling. Enough is enough.
Okay.
Perhaps my question is a bit delicate, but I have still ventured myself to ask the question.
Why should you force yourself to? Don't do it. You'll regret it. Asking such indelicate. No. Won't you please sit down? Don't harm yourself or your image. I shall read a poem called The Old Playhouse, which is a love poem. You planned to tame a swallow, to hold her in the long summer of your love, so that she would forget not the raw seasons alone and the homes left behind, but also her nature, the urge to fly, and the endless pathways of the sky. It was not to gather knowledge of yet another man that I came to you, but to learn what I was, and by learning, to learn to grow. But every lesson you gave was about yourself. You were pleased with my body's response, its weather, its usual shallow convulsions. You dribbled spittle into my mouth. You poured yourself into every nook and cranny. You embalmed my poor lust with your bitter-sweet juices. You called me wife. I was taught to break saccharine into your tea and to offer at the right moment the vitamins. Cowering beneath your monstrous ego, I ate the magic loaf and became a dwarf. I lost my will and reason. To all your questions, I mumbled incoherent replies. The summer begins to pall. I remember the ruder breezes of the fall and the smoke from burning leaves. Your room is always lit by artificial lights, your windows always shut. Even the air conditioner helps so little. All pervasive is the male scent of your breath. The cut flowers in the vases have begun to smell of human sweat. There is no more singing, no more a dance. My mind is an old playhouse with all its lights put out. The strong man's technique is always the same. He serves his love in lethal doses. For love is Narcissus at the water's edge, haunted by its own lonely face, and yet it must seek at last an end. A pure, total freedom. It must will the mirrors to shatter and the kind night to erase the water. This is a poem which the women in this audience might understand, might comprehend, but there will be questions from males. Because I remember reading something which Amrita Preetham, she's one of my favorite human beings. a very beautiful person, and I see her beauty. That's, when you talk of beauty, I see such face. Amrita wrote, when you come to my bed, remove your body and leave it with the clothes on the chair. I mean, it is not worded this way. It's something like that. You probably remember the poem. That is precisely the plea of every woman. See? You see, when we write, we do not glorify lust. We only write of lust to show women, to show men, this is what you are guilty of. Only lust. You forget. It's like, the Reserve Bank minting currency without gold security. See? There is something indecent about it. And and I think it's like counterfeit money. And you should not, I'm talking of, yes? Yeah, something like that. So the whole place is full of that, And it's like that, a man not loving her, but only feeling lust. You see, he has no right at all to touch her and defile her. That's precisely what I've been saying. Nothing else. Nothing more shocking. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's precisely why I wrote in prose. I write a column, I write essays, plays, everything, stories, novels. I do that, but only in Malayalam. Because in Kerala I have a Malayali audience around me. I didn't have an audience because I wrote in English. Then I went, there is a poet who writes in English. And so, English is not appreciated. There is a move really. Like in Delhi, there is this Delhi chauvinism, you know that. They don't want, they would like all of us to speak Hindi here. Well, no? Well, I don't know, but certainly, sometimes we feel uneasy. Sometimes we certainly feel uneasy, we South Indians. Yeah, that could be. But I have always found that I turn uneasy after coming to Delhi. I mean, it's all right staying for one day and reading poetry and going back. But if I were to stay on here for 3 days, if there is a seminar or a symposium, I feel so uncomfortable that physically I collapse. And you know it, Indira Goswami knows last time how I collapsed. It's too much for me, Delhi. It's so over-refined. People have become so over-refined. It's like eating a lot of refined sugar. It's deadly for me. I don't know, there's so much of over-refinement, which will not agree with people like me. Over-refined. My God, aren't you all, I mean, not you, Delhi. That's it. Delhi, of course, might expect a writer to come here and be very charming, just, wear no jewelry, because be modern. You see, this is an outrageous outfit, because you see, be absolutely modern, go ethnic or something, wear something which a fisherwoman or a beggar might wear, that's all. But not beyond that, and all that, My dear friend, I have been hearing your voice, and I tell you, you're probably the sweetest person in this auditorium. So you are an exception. No, it's true. I used to be very fond of Delhi. In fact, I wept when we had to leave Delhi after 3 years, because we had some good friends. But then friends became silent, we fell silent, friendships disappeared. So then I associate this with a lot of, with a cold wave or something. People suddenly stopping to like you, that kind. Anything can happen in Delhi. I meant something else. Systems and arrangement. The body is arranged such a way, the cells, the veins, that's the system, isn't it? Or I might even mean political systems, which also disintegrate. Thank God. Yes.
Would you like to say how much is fake and how much is deliberate, how much allow the anguish to come through genuinely?
No.
You draw a line.
No emotion is faked. That I can tell you. The voice was made stronger by exercise. Just as my mind is made stronger. You see, I didn't have a library to fall back on. Nobody tried to educate me. So I knew that I had to rely on myself. Exercise the brains, exercise the memory. So that, you can cope with this world. That's all. So I trained my voice, made it a carrying voice. Because it's part of my profession as a poet to go around and read. That's why. It's not fake. I don't think you'll find anything phony in me. It'll be very difficult. Not from the, yes, my mother, yes, sometimes. Sometimes it gives a great thrill to the Keralites to see the mother and daughter sitting together. So we are dragged to the stage and exhibited. A mother-daughter team, yes? No. She believes in freedom, just as I do. I will not be correcting my children either. You've got to learn.
Madam, what is your definition of refinement? I am hearing first time that you are refined.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yes. You know better than I do. I just come here like a bird. I fly back the next day. Or the refinement.
What is your definition of refinement?
So much of it, excuse me and that, and oh pardon, and I beg your pardon. All that kind of thing, You sneeze and you go on saying, and if you haven't heard, that pardon again, it is repeated. I beg your pardon, did you? You have just sneezed or something. No, I don't know really. What I mean, is there some word called preciosity or something? I don't know. The English experts will correct me. There is some such word. No, not at all, thank God. I don't want to be emancipated because I have seen so many of them totally emancipated and they irritate their husbands. Oh, because I hear complaints from men, that wives have become so emancipated, they dictate and they frighten them. And all of them have turned into mice, the men. Yeah?
Do you think that women should not irritate their husbands by becoming emancipated?
Then why have a husband at all? Poor fellow, let him go to somebody. Huh? If you want to. Yeah.
Are you advocating a woman who should be totally under the thumb of a...
Not under the thumb, but it's a great pleasure, let me tell you, to be pleasing a man and to be pleased by him.
I think you can be emancipated and still please your husband.
Well, it's possible. You must know. I don't know because I don't know.
There is a little road. जिसको क्रिया चरित्र बोलते थे पुराने जमाने में. All of our dadis and nanis practiced it for centuries by practicing kriya charitra. They never let their men find out what they were up to. They never raised their voices. They never annoyed their men. And all the nanis and the dadis of India did exactly what they wanted to do. All of our grandmothers were emancipated women. And we can all follow our grandmothers.
May I tell you something? Sometimes you might get annoyed with me because I come from another kind of community. We were matrilineal, we are still matriarchal. You must remember. So you see, when I seek my roots, I find such people there, Women used to run the household, everything. Women owned property. See, the matriarch ruled. So it's very difficult for me to understand, comprehend when people come and tell me this is what happened here. You know only patriarchy. See? And it was only with Mahatma Gandhi's advent into Kerala, when he came to lecture, that patriarchy seemed reasonable to our people. Of course, they didn't accept it, but they felt it was not too bad trying to emulate Kasturba Gandhi, for instance. You know, the women, our women all tried to. Yes. That is an old-fashioned mehendi, which we wear as married women to prolong our husbands' lives, they say. So I have a lot of mehendi growing in my garden, and my maidservant likes to apply this on my hands. So I don't mind. And I suppose, then when I went to America last month, I could also tell them that since my hands are tinted, I should not shake hands with people. I wanted to avoid that. So I said, well, I don't want the dye to wear off. Please forgive me. I'm an Orthodox Hindu. Don't. You see, I managed well. There was a gentleman who was questioned and later sat down somewhere there.
Opinion about Indo-English poetry.
Ah.
And also this English and American poetry, your view whether and where
You must look out for good literature. Everything is now jaded. You must look out for good literature to emerge from Lanka, where there's trouble. Within 10 years, you will find beautiful literature coming from such places, because you can only you can see mushrooms sprouting after it has thundered. See, when there's been lightning, it's like that. There must be trouble. Probably in Kashmir, some good poetry will emerge out of this problem. See, because you can't find good literature coming from Russia now. Let me tell you, from Soviet Union, I think don't expect anything for the next 10 years. That. Must have. Or probably are they too poor to publish books? I don't know. He has such terrible tales about Bangladesh. Surely if there's been suffering, they will write. And what else can create poets? Only pain and suffering. You can't expect a person who is complacent and happy to produce poetry. It's not poetry at all. It will be verse, or it will be humorous verse, which has also become very fashionable these days. Just produce humorous verse. That's not literature. What do you expect?
about poetry there in the next 10 years? Just as we expected that there will be no growth in literature in US as well. After you visit to the United States, what is your feeling about the future of poetry in America?
In America, you might find a kind of muddled poetry, because they're all drug addicts now, most of them. So in fact, some people were telling me that there are so many situations vacant there. If the Indians could come there, they could even get all those jobs, because the Americans have become drug addicts. They don't want them any longer. Everybody is getting thrown out of the office. See, in New York, I could hardly find Americans. They were all non-Americans, Mexicans, Spaniards, and Japs. Another forecast which I can make here is that in 10 years' time, Japs will own 3/4 of America. They're steadily buying up property, buying up factories, and buying up everything. Cartiers, you'll see only Japs, Japanese women. And smug. And because Japan is the greatest creditor. America is a debtor to Japan. You see? Pardon? Third world. Third world. We are all third world, aren't we? Let's all sit and write something before the world ends. At least nature is ending. Before that happens, let us write something. We have no time at all. So, somebody's got to. Pardon? Yeah, I'll read something on Lanka, where I lived for 2 years. I'm a pen force, my dear, so far as poetry is concerned. I did write something, but I wouldn't, well, I will read it for what it's worth. Yes. Yes, of course. Mm. Tell me. Yes. You see, you'll be surprised when I tell you frankly that my thoughts do not come in English or in Malayalam. They're just like shadows, waiting, like shadows falling in caverns. You see, it's probably baby language. How does a baby think, an infant who has not learnt any language, who has no vocabulary? I think that way, and I rely only on that. I'm always guided by one guru. That is my instinct. And you may not go wrong. It's easier. I don't find it easy to write either in English or in Malayalam. Language is very difficult for me. I have such a limited vocabulary, It's very difficult, but the thoughts are there all the time, coming. It's almost as if, a car is coming right to the very end and over the precipice there is a car or something like that, which will fall. The thoughts are there, but to cover them, to wrap them up in decent language, I don't have any language that can be very useful. Yes, the thoughts are there naturally. Produce, I'll have to choose either of these two languages, unfortunately. But I'm actually planning, you'll be surprised, I have notebooks. I'm discovering a new language, trying to make a new language, create it, because which will suit me. Because I have yet to find a language which can keep pace with thinking. It is very tough. So if there is something very simple, which can, I try to. No, it's quite different. It doesn't have any similarity. It's something which I am trying to. It's like a mantra. But I should be able to. After it is perfected, I will give it to the public. Yes, I certainly do. But unfortunately, there was no time to teach me singing. But I have cousins. I have one sitting right here in the auditorium. I will not mention the name, who sings beautifully. I'm very fond of. Nay. Chi. I'm not fond of that book. Not that fond. I wrote that when I was very young. Popular, yes, but because it has been misunderstood, so heavily misunderstood. So why should I? It's like a cross, on which I am nailed for the past so many years, and I am tired of it. I suppose I was a very simple woman, just wanted to be loved by my husband, and at that time he didn't love me. That was number one pain. But all that is over. I managed to earn his love. You have to fight and earn somebody's love and respect. It doesn't come easy to you. You've got to work. I realized it's like learning new languages, learning new things, medicine. For instance, I used to buy medical books just for the fun of it. As a hobby, I would read them and study medicine. Nobody asked me to, but it gave me a lot of fun. I think we've got to go and fight to get anything. Struggle. And now I don't have any complaint. Yes? I don't think there's so much of difference between a woman and a man. I don't even consider it to be that important, the little difference. We need it only when we want to create children. Otherwise, what is it? It's all the same. We are dealing with people, the minds. See? Except this physical difference which is not significant, which is not consequential. What difference is there? They're all the same. Man. Yes? Yes, that's true. There are that's quite true. That's true. That's also true. I will tell you. For one, for a long time, while my children were growing up, I used to sit on a stool in the kitchen and sit there. I'll be making something and think. So if at all I educated myself, it was right there in the kitchen. You see, if you have that kind of an ambition, if you have a desire to grow, I think you will grow. Everybody cannot, but frankly, I'm limited. I can only talk about myself. So that is precisely why I became a social worker. My house is sometimes filled with people who come and complain to me, women. And I want to tell them, I want to give them some kind of help. I'm not rich enough to give any financial aid, but I suppose I can just touch them, make them feel that there is someone who listens. Because women who are unhappy need listeners, mainly. No? No, if there is someone, I try my level best, but there are limitations on time. I wouldn't like to. It will sound so much like bragging, and today is hardly the time. I shouldn't brag at all. I personally would like to say bad things about me. It's my nature. I don't like to talk about my achievements. I don't like to brag, boast, because on the stage it will come out very jarring. This is a beautiful evening, little bit of poetry, friendship, that. But if I were to say, well, this is what I have done, this is what I have achieved, it will be funny. What I have lost, I am ready to say. Where I have bungled, I can talk about that. But if I suppose I am trying, and before... Yeah, I'll tell you what. Cultivate compassion. That's it. Never have a cruel thought about anyone. It helps. It really helps a writer. I think the best literature must come out of compassion. Only that will survive. Yes, some of them were feminists and they look like men. That's the first impression. That's all. And then they don't pay any attention to hygiene. For instance, they're not bothered about taking baths. So you see, you get an auditorium full of people drenched in sweat, and that sort of thing puts me off. I belong to an older generation. I believe in bath and poetry. I believe it's, no, I did listen to some of them, very militant for one thing, and the anger is a bit too much. You know, they would have collapsed in anger. The anger was too much of a burden on their tongue, this I can tell you. See, little lightening of anger would help the female poets. Yes, there were 3 poets, one of them being myself, and we were put on the stage. 2 of them brought out their political poems. One was Nicaraguan poetess Clarabelle Alegre, very well known. The other was Audre Lorde, the Negro poetess from America, very militant, feminist, and old-fashioned poet from Asia, that is myself.
Now to unwittingly do the question of balance of payments into the question of poetry, maybe extremely strong in poetry, but very weak in economics. So even suggesting a nightmare where the gap will one day buy off America, that's not going to happen. Because countries are not traded off in international trade like this.
What happened to the...
Would you expect that if, let's say that happens, which would be quite a nightmare, would you think that American would start writing haiku only and completely convert it?
I'm not really bothered so much about their haiku or anything. It's just that I felt the Japanese were looking very, very confident. Didn't they buy the Rockefeller Center? They bought so many places, prime property they are buying.
No,
I don't say that. I do, but No, not all.
Poets who were there last week were excellent young poets from West, and I think it's flourishing. I don't think you can write it off.
That's quite true. That's quite true. Maybe, but they were all hidden away, unfortunately, when I went there. You see? I met a lot of economists. Yes, but you can't, it's all right serving pain to readers who do not know you, but only in small doses. Don't give them in lethal doses and kill them. That's what I say. For everything, let there be a proportion. Which one? White? I don't know. I don't want to be an expert here because I spent only 8 days there. After the seminar and everything got over, I just came back because I had someone to look after. That's it. So it will be very difficult. But the Japs, of course, I make this ridiculous forecast. They may not take over that place. Maybe you're right. No, you can't say, You can't be sure. But they show such confidence. They're so smug. Every jeweler shop, Cartier is full of Japanese women. And they look very feminine, the Japanese women. See? Acha, fine. I used to when I was young. Now, of course, I don't get much time to write letters. That's gone out of my life. This is called Smoke in Colombo. We came for 2 days to Bombay. There was some function, and we returned to Colombo. My husband was an IMF consultant in Colombo. We stayed there. We lived there for 2 years. And we had no idea that there would be this trouble. And on 23rd July, we returned to Colombo. And on the plane, somebody said there was curfew. We didn't know what it meant, got down, and with the help of the police, at dawn, we drove to our residence. Smoke in Colombo. On that last ride home, we had the smoke following us along the silent streets, lingering on, though the fire was dead then, in the rubble and the ruins, lingering on as milk lingers on in udders after the calves are buried, lingering on as grief lingers on within women rocking emptied cradles. They stopped us as somnambulistic days was in their eyes. There was no space between us and their guns, but we were too fatigued to feel fear or resist the abrupt moves of an imbecilic will. We were stopped there for about, 40 times we were stopped on the road. And they pointed the guns at us. And I thought my husband would get shot. They were naval chaps, youngsters, ordered to hate us, ordered to kill us. And we escaped, of course, because all along I wore my Muslim burqa and pretended to be from Pakistan. So I managed to go and buy dal and atta and all for my husband. I kept him alive. We came back safe. Because they wouldn't have touched a Pakistani woman. I wore that and I would go and all that inshallah and salam alaikum. It is perfect, absolutely perfect. They said, you don't have to worry. We will only kill those South Indians. I managed. Then, like a half-burned corpse was that one splendid city, its maimed limbs turned towards the smoke-stained sky, and even the small leaves of the Katur Murunga stopped their joyous tremor while the sea breezes blew. No bird song in the trees, only the stomp of boots worn by the adolescent gunmen ordered to hate. Did the Tamils smell so different? What secret chemistry led them down? Was there a faint scent of jasmine in their women's hair? But how did they track down the little ones whose voices rose each morning with the national flag and his betrayed lion, an affectionate beast, a king of kings led down by his son? How did they track down the little ones who knew not their ethnic inferiority? The city was grey and every window was shut. Fear was in the air as the corpses smoldered. Fear and a stench sweet as that of raw cashew nuts roasting. The sea did its duty as usual at the Gulf-Face Green. Without a sign of fear, without a sign of shock or pain, it patrolled the empty shore. Thank you very much. I think we have had.